In the town of Hollow Ridge, people don't go out after dark. The moment the sun sinks behind the jagged hills, every door is bolted, every window is locked, and the streets fall into an unnerving silence. But it's not completely quiet. There's one sound that drifts through the empty town. A slow, dragging step, followed by the faint, rhythmic clink of a lantern. The Lantern Man. Children whisper stories about him in hushed tones, while adults refuse to speak his name at all. But everyone, from the youngest child to the oldest resident, knows the rules. If you hear the lantern, do not look outside, do not speak. And above all, do not let the light touch you. These rules weren't just folklore. They were the key to survival in Hollow Ridge. Leah McKinley, now 24, returned to this town of shadows after a decade away. The sudden death of her father had pulled her back to a place she'd spent years trying to forget. She was old enough to have forgotten the immediate, suffocating fear, but not old enough to have escaped the nightmares that still crept into her sleep. Her father's house stood at the edge of the forest, a lonely sentinel against the trees. Inside, the air was cold and stale with dust. The electricity was unreliable, flickering like a dying pulse. The floorboards groaned under her weight, and the windows rattled with a wind that never felt like just wind. On his desk, her father's journal lay open to the last page he ever wrote. The words were a chilling premonition. He comes for the lonely. He comes for the grieving. And now, I am both. That very night, as the house settled into its familiar, eerie quiet, Leah heard it. A sound from her childhood terrors. Clink, 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 the lantern. At first, she tried to dismiss it. It had to be her imagination, a trick of memory stirred up by her return to this haunted place. But then, a pale, moving glow washed over her window. It moved slowly, deliberately, as if it was searching for something, for someone. Against her better judgment, Leah pulled back the edge of the curtain just enough to peek outside. A figure stood in the yard. It was tall, almost unnaturally so, completely drowned in a long black coat. Its face was hidden in the shadow of a wide, dripping hat, as if it had just emerged from a storm that wasn't happening. In one hand, it held a rusted lantern that glowed with an impossible, sterile white light. The other hand hung empty at its side, but she could see long, thin fingers twitching restlessly. The figure didn't move, but the lantern swung softly, a gentle pendulum in the darkness, almost as if it were breathing. Then suddenly it stopped. The figure tilted its head, a subtle, sharp movement, as if it could sense her eyes on it, even through the glass. A wave of pure terror washed over Leah as she dropped the curtain, her heart pounding in her throat. And just as she did, the lantern light went out, plunging the yard back into absolute darkness. She didn't sleep a wink that night. The next morning, desperate for answers, Leah went to see the only person in Hollow Ridge who might know the truth. Old Miriam, the town's unofficial historian and keeper of its darkest secrets. When Leah arrived, Miriam refused to open her door, speaking only through the tiny crack she allowed. Her voice was a dry, fearful whisper. "Your father brought him," she hissed. "He never told you?" "Told me what?" Leah asked, her own voice trembling. "That the Lantern Man comes for those who try to escape their grief. Your father, he kept that house dark for years, hid inside, lost in his sorrow after your mother passed. But you left him, child? You left him all alone, and the Lantern Man came for him." Leah felt a cold sickness spread through her stomach. Miriam's words were like stones, heavy and sharp. Before slamming the door shut, the old woman added one last, terrifying warning. "Whatever you do, don't let him speak to you." That night, the sound returned, just as she knew it would. Clink, 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 the chilling rhythm of the lantern echoed in the dead quiet house. But this time, it was followed by something new, something far worse. Knock, knock, a firm, deliberate rap on her front door. Leah backed away, her heart hammering against her ribs, and then she heard it. A voice that made the blood freeze in her veins. It was her father's voice. "Leah, please, let me in." She froze, shaking her head. "No, that's not real. That's not real." But the voice came again, closer this time, breaking with a desperate, begging tone. "Leah, you left me. You left me all alone." The lantern's light burned brightly under the door, a blade of white, unnatural light slicing through the darkness. She clamped her hands over her ears, tears streaming down her face, and screamed at the top of her lungs, "Go away." Instantly, the light vanished. The knocking stopped. The house fell silent. But then, a whisper, faint and cold as the grave, materialized right behind her ear. "You can't run from grief." Shaken, but now filled with a new kind of resolve, Leah returned to her father's journal. She flipped through the pages, searching for anything, and found another entry, tucked away near the end. It wasn't a warning this time. It was a confession. "The lantern man is not death," her father had written. "He is what grief becomes when you refuse to face it." The next lines chilled her to the bone. "He showed me her face, your mother's face. I followed him into the woods." The entry ended there, unfinished. And in that moment, Leah understood. The lantern man wasn't something to be hidden from. He had to be confronted. That night, she didn't wait for the knocking. When the lantern's light began to shimmer at the edge of the forest, Leah took a deep breath, unbolted the door, and stepped outside. She was trembling, but her fear was now matched by a grim determination. The lantern man stood beneath a dead, skeletal tree, his lantern glowing like a dying star. As she approached, his head lifted slowly. He didn't move toward her. He just waited. Leah stopped a few feet away, her voice shaking but clear. "What do you want from me?" The lantern man didn't answer. Instead, he raised the lantern. Inside the glass, floating in the ethereal white light, she saw him. Her father. His face was pale, his eyes hollow, his hand reaching out for her. Tears streamed down Leah's face as she looked at the ghostly image. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the words catching in her throat. "I'm so sorry I left you." As she spoke, the brilliant light in the lantern began to dim. The figure of her father flickered and dissolved. The lantern man took a slow step back, then another, his form seeming to melt and blend with the shadows of the trees. And then he was gone. The lantern went out, and the woods were silent and dark. The next morning, the forest felt different. Peaceful. The lantern man was gone. Leah went to the town cemetery and placed a simple, unlit lantern on her father's grave. "I'm here now," she whispered to the cold stone, "and I won't run anymore." That night, for the first time in years, Hollow Ridge slept soundly. There were no dragging footsteps, no eerie lights. The lantern man had no one left to haunt. But even now, on the quietest nights, when the wind blows just right through the trees at the edge of town, Leah sometimes thinks she can hear a faint, distant sound. Clink, clink, clink. A quiet reminder from somewhere deep in the woods. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more Tales from the Shadows.